Humanities faculty are sometimes inspired, sometimes dutiful, sometimes reluctant curricular tinkerers. No matter the posture, we are constantly engaged in curricular revision. Successive generations of faculty remake standard courses into their own versions, design new ones that bend toward the horizons of disciplinary preoccupation. Now we find ourselves in the midst of curricular challenges related to large transformations in higher education and changes in the everyday micro-practices of sociality brought to us by a repertoire of technological devices and affordances. As to large issues, Randall Bass, who is Vice Provost for Education at Georgetown, has been speaking extensively about the shift from the instructional paradigm to the learning paradigm in what he terms the post-Coursera, with a little play on Coursera there. The phrase references the way in which the formal curriculum through which higher education has been structured is being decentered as the locus of learning. Now learning is recognized to take place in non-traditional course-based venues, in zones of informal learning, in project-based classrooms, in the intensities and curiosities of high-impact practices, and in the experiential co-curriculum of internships, study abroad, and public projects. Recognizing this new environment of learning, Bass, along with Kathy Davidson and Theo Goldberg, among many others, advanced the importance of cultures of participatory learning that aim to tutor students in how to speak from positions of authority, how to recognize disciplinary competence and interdisciplinary synergies. To focus on learning, writes Bass, is to recognize that the connection between integrative thinking or experiential learning and the social network or participatory culture is no longer peripheral to our enterprise, but is the nexus that should guide and reshape our curricula in the current disruptive moment in higher education learning, end quote. To focus on participatory learning turns upon what happens with students as they engage new information, new models of inquiry and practice, new disciplinary imperatives, new applications of thinking, new venues of self-reflection. It is the shift from the teaching dyad to the learning ensemble. It is to shift from the subject position of teachers showing what we know and acolytes absorbing the knowledge to fluid subject positions within exchange networks and collaboratories. It is to shift from a singularity of purpose to a heterogeneity of worldviews. It is to shift from the ends of accumulating knowledge to the practices of producing and performing knowledge. The affordances of technologies, among them social media, digital archives, platforms for online composing, multimedia open educational resources, and online and offline learning networks have brought disruptions of the formal curriculum and enabled new possibilities for the dispersed informal curriculum. Yet such learning and teaching must derive from the goals of education rather than the affordances of technology, though technologies are central to achieving these goals. Humanities faculty are out there in this new space, breaking through the routines of faculty exchanges with students around reading, writing, and testing. Some are adopting new student-centered assessment formats, such as e-portfolios. Some are experimenting with new models for organizing courses and curriculum. One described by John Seeley Brown as reversing the flow. That's one idea for a new model. Foregoing the model that begins with inculcation of expert knowledge and then follows with practice in applying that knowledge in favor of a model that entwines learning and practice from the get-go. Some are mixing up kinds of work assigned to students, heading away from the usual kind of assessment instruments, from formulaic, deadline-driven, inconsequential after-submission work, to activities and writing projects that contribute to the shared classroom experience, to advancing the conversations and enhancing the learning environment. Some humanities faculty are imagining the endpoint of their courses as something left behind or something spanning semesters, a link on a department website, databases upon which later researchers draw, a digital curation, an open access journal. One of my colleagues, Anne Curzan, who's now the Associate Dean for Humanities, is a scholar of language change and an inspired classroom teacher. In a course on grammar she's taught in the past, she had upwards of 100 students enter 3 of their past papers into searchable databases of student essays. That database, combined with historical databases, then became the evidentiary material through which students explored shifts in language usage. She had her students doing real work, developing hypotheses, searching for patterns across time, rethinking the constantly changing action of linguistic usage, recognizing it in their own everyday exchanges. An increasing number of humanities faculty at big universities and small colleges are imagining new designs for blended classrooms, joining students on different campuses together for project-based learning. Some are developing multi-campus courses for delivery of less commonly taught languages. All these innovations in classroom practice depend on robust cyber infrastructure. How humanities faculty teach now is a changing assemblage of software and platforms, student interest and institutional structures, infrastructure and generational competencies, people and objects, expertise and curiosity. Teaching now is a hybrid of traditional classroom practices and participatory or practice-based learning. It takes place in hybrid formats, combining face-to-face and sometimes online environments. Learning is close and distant, course-based and post-course, flexible and adaptive to student needs. Classes are flipped, expertise distributed, sociality networked, learning collaborative, and faculty and students in this environment become open scholars, contributing open educational resources to the cloud and the crowd. In these environments, learning joins teacher and student, peer-to-peer, and student to crowd and cloud. It unfolds through multiple modalities, involves all the senses. In these encounters, students gain critical intelligence about what it means to live in new environments of information, communication, ethical exchange, and sociality, and the interpretive skills to assess the impact of technologies on society, the environment, the global economy, and their own self-understanding. It's an exhilarating time. It's a stressful time. In this new space of possibility, the urgent issues confronting humanities faculty multiply. How do students study, research, process, and compose now? Where can we find attention, and how do we mobilize it? How do we model reading on multiple levels simultaneously? How do digital media shape, facilitate, and also limit the ways we and our students access information, represent data, develop and communicate ideas, collaborate on intellectual projects, define scholarship itself? How do I find the resources proliferating through projects of digitization and sites for open access resources? How do I collaborate with the experts across campuses upon whom faculty depend to realize pedagogical visions for the digital environments of the classroom? How do I even know what needs to be known in this environment? How much technical expertise do I need to pull off new classroom ventures? Where do I want to begin my experiment or innovation? What work will I ask my students to do? What will be the products of the class? How will I incorporate open educational resources and platforms in the course design? Resources such as the Shareway WordPress for composing short-form scholarly communication, or resources such as the collaborative mapping program, WorldMap, developed at Harvard, funded by NEH, and dedicated to compiling a global service registry of maps. How will I orchestrate new kinds of projects? The questions keep coming. That's why we are here this morning, to explore humanities classrooms, digital environments, critical questions. This Provost seminar is a time for us to engage one another across tables, exchanging ideas about ways digital environments shape our individual and collective practice as teachers, and the personal, curricular, and institutional implications of our engagements with digital media in and out of formal teaching and learning environments. Thank you.